McLaren's misfiring F1 title defence has exposed various weaknesses and a reality that's badly caught it out. The team that won both championships last season is yet to win a race this year, as McLaren has had to watch engine supplier Mercedes dominate most of 2026 so far. The new engine rules have turned the tables back in favour of works teams, and on top of that, McLaren just hasn't done as good a job at the start of this rules cycle with its own car, which has lacked the attributes that lifted it to the very top of the previous generation. That's why world champion Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have fewer points between them than Mercedes championship leader Kimi Antonelli has managed so far. They've got a couple of podiums each, and Norris was a genuine victory threat in Miami, but McLaren admits it needs a significant step in performance and reliability to turn its season around and get properly into title contention. The clearest ceiling it could bump up against trying to do that though is that McLaren is counting the cost of its customer team status for the first time since reuniting with Mercedes in 2021. This first emerged through the early realisation that Mercedes was way more on top of extracting a lot of subtle performance potential in the new engines, but also extends to a series of reliability problems underlining where the priority for Mercedes' engine division really lies. McLaren only realised it was lagging behind the works team in having all the information needed to best exploit the engines when cars ran on track at the start of the year and the sensitivities of these engines became apparent. It also felt on the back foot when it came to predicting how the car would behave and how it could therefore be improved, as customers were still figuring out how changing a detail in one place had such a big effect elsewhere around the lap. So it took until round 3 in Japan before McLaren looked like it was more or less a match for Mercedes just on energy deployment, hence its deficit chipped away from just under a second to half a second to just a few tenths in a matter of weeks. Rule changes since then have also dulled the extreme edges of that energy management challenge and made it less of a topic. But the concern moved swiftly from engine performance to engine reliability, as McLaren suffered a double pre-race electrical problem in China that meant neither driver could start the Grand Prix there. Norris also required a new battery in Japan despite only switching to a new version of that component at the start of that event, suffered a gearbox problem that forced him to stop during the Canada race, then had an issue with the internal combustion engine in Monaco. Team principal Andreas Stella was keen to stress after that race that we have had issues pretty much in all areas of the car, so this isn't just a Mercedes engine matter. But breaking curfew twice in 2 weekends, Monaco and Barcelona, was a direct consequence of problems it didn't fully understand, although in Barcelona there was a precautionary change related to the installation of some power unit parts. This at least hinted McLaren may have found the root cause, even if it was a little too late for its liking. McLaren's never questioned the quality of the equipment it's been given, but it is living a new customer reality. When there is so much to learn, iterate and improve at the start of a new rule cycle with the engines, how they are installed into the cars and how they are used, there's a lower ceiling for a customer even if the relationship is genuinely good when it's in effect. McLaren's discovered it has less opportunity to integrate the engine into its own car design optimally, which hints at where some reliability issues may have arisen, but also to stay on the same timeline as the works team, whether that's in addressing problems or maximising performance. Mercedes High Performance Powertrains is aware its product hasn't been robust enough for a valued customer, as there's obviously no intention to provide an engine package that doesn't work reliably, so this is something that it's trying very hard to understand and improve. But a customer will always sit behind a works team when it comes to getting what it needs on car and engine integration, information that contains sensitive intellectual property, using shared facilities, and being a timeline priority. Maximising collaboration is the whole point of a manufacturer developing its own engine, so of course Mercedes has been ahead of the curve, working as one single entity, and this advantage at the start of brand new rules is ultimately the reward it gets for committing to and funding a full works F1 project. McLaren expected this to some extent, but perhaps underestimated how much, while the reality of the 2026 formula was still hypothetical. It always remained adamant that things could continue as they had the last few years. After all, McLaren became the first customer team to win a world championship in F1's hybrid engine era when it won the Constructors' title in 2024, then did the double in 25. McLaren felt there was no reason to expect it would slip back in a brand new engine rules era in 26, but its customer success came against the backdrop of a multi-year engine homologation freeze and power units that were vastly well understood. It made engine supply deals much more favourable and effectively allowed McLaren to operate as a pseudo-works team. This was never going to continue indefinitely, and a major rules overhaul is when the works edge will be sharpest. This season is more akin to the start of the V6 turbo hybrid era in 2014, when Mercedes dominated its customers and led McLaren to its ill-fated Honda union from 2015 to 17. F1 is slightly different now, so control over different engine modes and the demand for equipment parity across teams negate the most extreme advantages that were enjoyed back then. But the 2026 engines being so complicated and causing new performance and reliability issues have re-established a disadvantage that still existed in principle but was negligible. There is of course a bulletproof way of shielding yourself from the disadvantages of being a customer team. Be a works team instead. McLaren most recently considered a works partnership with Audi when a few years ago the German manufacturer was assessing its options to join the grid, but it opted against that because Audi wanted to own the team. Rival Red Bull has now created a blueprint for an independent team to commit to its own engine project entirely, building the Red Bull Powertrains division that then picked up backing from Ford to develop its own in-house F1 engine for the first time. That project scored its first podium in Canada last month, qualified on the front row in Monaco, and looks respectively competitive immediately. It's even controversially been judged as having F1's best internal combustion engine by the FIA's methodology for establishing which manufacturers get upgrades this year. But committing to an engine division was a massive undertaking from Red Bull and would require enormous investment from McLaren shareholders or the buy-in from a third party, as it could collaborate with an automotive manufacturer. This would represent a significant strategic shift, and though McLaren Racing CEO Zak Brown admitted as recently as in Monaco that McLaren will at least conduct a preliminary evaluation of that route whenever F1 commits to its next set of simpler engine rules for 2030 or 2031, its plan and priority is to remain as one of Mercedes' customer teams. That long-term aim and the simple short-term need to work as well as possible with its partner means McLaren has to simply find ways to improve the Mercedes customer relationship in this new era. McLaren is thoroughly reviewing how it works with HPP to see how it can make processes as robust as possible to get ahead of issues before the car runs at the track, and as Stella put it, retain the standards of a championship-winning partnership. A key thread running through all of this though is that McLaren has its own problems besides the engine. It is lacking a mixture of pure aerodynamic load in medium speed corners, which was previously a massive strength, and also is missing some tyre understanding, which leaves the car short of grip in too many circumstances. At its best, like Miami and the race in Barcelona, it can get very close to Mercedes level. Norris even won the Miami sprint when Mercedes was still slightly out of sorts earlier in the weekend. But its main car weaknesses were brutally exposed in Monaco in particular, which was a clear reality check. Before that race, Stella had viewed low-speed corners among McLaren's strengths, but now there's a question mark over this. And even if it's okay aerodynamically in this range, mechanically the car just doesn't work as well. It's been hard to drive, with Norris particularly outspoken at times about this, and Stella's pinpointed a struggle to get the tyres in the right window as a clear development priority. This first emerged in colder conditions on a smooth track in Canada, then was really pronounced in Monaco. There, the issue was warming up the tyres enough to generate more grip, which was put down to the car retaining previous DNA of being gentler on its tyres. But this got muddied at Barcelona, where initially Norris feared its degradation advantage disappeared and Piastri had a shocking race. Norris was surprisingly strong in the Grand Prix, so clearly the McLaren does have this strength at times. Miami was a hot race too. But the tyre mastery of recent seasons has slipped because it seems like it's a hard window to get the car into. There also seems to be something McLaren's missing in terms of how the vehicle dynamics interact with the tyres. An interesting, more nuanced trait of these cars is that the slightly smaller Pirelli tyres don't offer consistent grip in transition from straight line braking to lock being applied for and then through the corner. This is something the McLaren seems quite sensitive to at the moment, which causes locking and/or a lack of grip. Ultimately, Norris reckons McLaren just simply isn't at the level it was previously, where it had gradually developed a car that worked almost everywhere. Now it has outliers and weaknesses that are still hurting even on its best days.